Good afternoon, everyone. It is a privilege and an honor and a delight for me to welcome and introduce David Sinden for the 2026 Jones Lecture. David is the organist and choir master at St. Luke's Episcopal Church and St. Peter's Episcopal Church in St. Louis, Missouri. With his choir there, they have released one album of American Hymnody, which is a delightful album I recommend to all of you. David is the co-creator and host of the All Things Right and Musical podcast. He is an essayist on all things church music related. You can find many of his essays at blog.sinden.org. David's a published composer, and in fact, we have sung a few of his service music settings here in the Chapel of the Apostles earlier during this academic year. David is married to Anna Timberlake, who is a professional recorder, player, and teacher. So if Herbert Howells passes you by, but you're dying to know what it's like to live with a professional recorder player, also David is a source of information for that. And he is the proud father of William and Margaret. So without further ado, David Sinden.
Thank you.
Probably they can't see me. So do you mind if I stop?
Oh, sure.
Share?
Oh, yeah, please. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for that introduction. Last night, I was scrolling on Facebook, and someone had very kindly from the seminary shared this lecture. And as Facebook is wont to do, it was trying to be helpful with some AI prompts at the bottom. And the first one was, "Who is David Sinden?" And now I know, so thank you. Thanks to the dean and to the lecture committee, to Margaret Stapleton, who's hard at work behind me, Sarah Limbaugh, and Mark and Sarah Ardrey Graves, and to the whole School of Theology community. Your hospitality and welcome has been really extraordinary this week, and I'm really delighted to be with you today. It was a dark and stormy night. Okay, that's not true. Nothing in the records say it was stormy. And it wasn't terribly dark as our story begins, at least not inside Gloucester Cathedral at the Three Choirs Festival in 1910. But it was night, and the meeting of two characters, a young Herbert Howells and the rising superstar English musician Ralph Vaughan Williams, feels almost like something out of a Hollywood script. At the Three Choirs Festival, it was tradition for composers to conduct their own works. And sharing the billing that night were Vaughan Williams and Edward Elgar. And who better to take up the story at this point but Herbert Howells himself? But what mattered was, this is a quote, but what mattered was that it was Tuesday night, an Elgar night, a dedicated Elgar audience, all devotees of the by then accepted masterpiece, The Dream of Gerontius. But there, conducting a strange work for strings, RVW himself, a comparative or complete stranger. And his fantasy would be holding up the dream, maybe for 10 minutes, in fact, for twice 10 as it happened. He left the rostrum in the non-applauding silence of those days, thanks be, and he came to the empty chair next to mine, carrying a copy of Gerontius, and presently was sharing it with me, while Elgar was conducting the first hearing I ever had of The Dream. For a music-bewildered youth of 17, it was an overwhelming evening, so disturbing and moving that I even asked RVW for his autograph and got it. Later that night, Howells and his close friend Ivor Gurney wandered the streets of Gloucester for hours, unwilling to return home and unable to sleep from the power of the experience that they had just shared. For the 17-year-old Herbert Howells, the experience resulted in more than just a sleepless night. By the time this was done, he had resolved not to continue to pursue a career as a concert pianist, but rather one as a composer. And here in this cathedral were many of the elements that would coalesce to form the shape of his many compositions, a sublime cathedral space, music from the English Tudor era, reclaimed and reimagined, and a Tudor era hymn tune at that, and the presence of Ralph Vaughan Williams and his music. Just 4 years before that memorable night at the Three Choirs concert, Vaughan Williams had helped oversee the publication of the English hymnal. In this book, a number of new tunes composed by Vaughan Williams appeared, including his blockbuster Sine Nomine, which is currently associated in many Christian denominations with the hymn For All the Saints Who From Their Labors Rest. Prior to this, however, Charles Villiers Stanford tried his hand at writing a modern tune for Bishop Howe's text. Many Episcopalians are very familiar with Stanford's tune Engelberg, though we don't associate it with its original text. Engelberg begins with a thump from the organ, a full chord that cues the entrance of the singing on the very next beat. Notably, Stanford's original accompaniment starts to diverge from the sung tune in the first measure. While the organ is still supportive of the singing, the tune is not played in the top line of the organ, putting the onus of leading the tune on the choir. Hymn tunes, by their very nature, repeat, but Stanford includes written out repeat signs on this hymn, one at the beginning here, and in this era, 4 dots were the way to mark a repeat sign in music. We've since simplified them to 2. And one at the end of the tune here. This removes any discretion the organist might have to place extra space in between the stanzas. In this case, the thump that started things also serves as the time to breathe before beginning each stanza. This is a new idea and a creative approach to hymn writing. The metrical pulse of the hymn never wavers. We might call this propulsive style of hymn singing the merry-go-round style. Once it starts, there's no getting off the ride until it comes to a complete stop. Let's sing example 1 in your handout, For All the Saints, to Stanford's Engelberg. Stanford's full treatment of the hymn goes on to be rather complex. There is choral harmony and a series of altered accompaniments for the organ. With Vaughan Williams' setting of this hymn, on the other hand, we have a smoother, simpler design. This hymn, too, begins with a thump, but it is a single note in the pedal that moves in tempo with the entrance of the voices. It may surprise us to know, however, that this heavy downbeat was not entirely sacred in Vaughan Williams' first printing of the hymn. Stanzas 2 and 3 are annotated with vocal entrances on the downbeat, accompanied by a full organ chord, as seen in this image. This asymmetry was smoothed out later, and it appears this way in the Episcopal Hymnal 1982. While there are no repeat signs, the writing is suggestive of a merry-go-round tune. Most modern organists lead it this way, but Vaughan Williams doesn't demand that in the score the way Stanford does. There's no repeat sign here. Another common element with Stanford is that of notating some of the inner stanzas and parts, but Vaughan Williams' parts are more straightforward than Stanford's, with the sopranos retaining the melody throughout. Another emerging tendency in the Anglican hymnody of the early 20th century was to change time signatures within the hymn. This can be seen in the lyrical 1918 hymn tune Love Unknown by John Ireland. In this tune, otherwise with 4 beats to the measure, Ireland strategically deploys measures with 6 beats at measure 1, 9, and 10. Another Passiontide tune with the same mixed meter tendencies is by Graham George, The King's Majesty. This 1939 tune was cutting edge when it was included in the hymnal 1940. Between the first 2 measures and the last 2 measures, which are in 4, no 2 consecutive measures are the same. They are variously in 3, 4, and 5. Howells knew these composers well. Howells was a student of Stanford at the Royal College of Music. There can be no question that from the night they shared a score at the Three Choirs Festival, Howells and Vaughan Williams maintained a close musical and personal relationship. And Howells admired John Ireland enough to write a piano piece for his 80th birthday. The earliest published hymn tune by Howells is St. Breville's. It was included in the 1925 hymnal Songs of Praise, another hymnal for which Vaughan Williams was involved as musical editor. The tune is paired with the hymn, My God, I Thank Thee Who Hast Made, by the 19th century poet Adelaide Ann Proctor. Proctor is perhaps better known as the poet of The Lost Chord, famously set to music by Arthur Sullivan. At first glance, St. Breville's appears relatively conventional. It is in 4 parts. The changing meter in this hymn is between 4 and 6 beats in a measure. But one unusual rhythmic figure stands out, a quarter note triplet figure that includes a dotted rhythm. It's at the end of the second stanza there, the second system of music. This rhythm is neither expected nor trivial, and I think it's reasonable to assume that congregations presented with this hymn would have experienced some difficulty every time they encountered it. Though widely published in the first edition of Songs of Praise, St. Breville's was replaced in the 1931 edition of the book. In its place, for the same hymn text, is a new tune by Howells, one of a more energetic, sturdy character, Severn. Severn is a unison tune, and the accompaniment seems partly inspired by the English thump in Vaughan Williams' Sine Nomine, or some of the tunes of Martin Shaw. In this case, there are 2 organ thumps that occur during the second note of the tune, on beats 2 and 3, and are played in octaves, a texture found almost continuously in Gustav Holst's carol, Personent Odie. Other octaves occur at the end of the second phrase. Howells doesn't change meter in Severn, but he does pay attention to subtle shifts of text accent in a new way. In measure 3, Howells changes the rhythm for the second stanza. So the first stanza would go, hast made the earth so bright. And for whatever reason, Howells wants to change that in the second stanza to even quarter notes. Hast made joy to abound. A sort of minor change on the page, but something that congregations would have to tend to. Further specifics on how Howells intends the words to align with the notes appear in measure 7, and again in measures 10 and 11. This kind of treatment of the poetry was unusual in hymn tunes of this time. It generally requires that the hymn be printed in a specific way, and it places a higher cognitive demand on the congregation than most hymns do. Howells' best-known hymn tune, Michael, is also an early one. Michael is one of 2 Howells tunes included in the hymnal 1982. It was written at a single sitting at the breakfast table, having just opened the mail and having received a request for a new hymn tune. The ability to craft a beautiful, enduring hymn tune in just a matter of minutes was something Howells apparently shared with John Ireland. Here, we have to note that one of the defining events in Howells' biography is the sudden and tragic death of his 9-year-old son, Michael. Some of the music that was associated by the general public as being written after Michael's death was actually written in the years prior. Furthermore, this was already a complicated and introspective period for Howells, wounded by heckling and criticism for what should have been a very significant premiere. Howells wrote very little music in the years on either side of his son's death. The de facto withdrawal of his first hymn tune coincides with this period. Howells' Requiem for unaccompanied choir was composed in 1932, but was kept secret and was not performed. So too, this majestic hymn tune, Michael, comes from the same period. It was composed in 1930. Michael Howells died of polio after a short hospitalization in 1935. So the tune may not have even received its name until it was being prepared for its first publication in the Clarendon Hymn Book in 1936. Aside from the name that we now have for the tune, nothing about the music suggests an elegy. While Howells freely shifts meter from 4 to 6, The tune moves steadily, almost gracefully, by half notes. The effect almost approaches that of a march that is somehow light on its feet. The music is in F major, and the harmonies move to conventional places. With one or two changes, it might even pass as an early keyboard work from the Tudor era. It is fortunate that Howells found this back-of-the-envelope method of composition because it resulted in a landmark 20th century hymn tune. Michael doesn't have a rhythmic quirk like St. Breville's, nor does it need any specific text adjustment while singing like Severn. Perhaps because of the easy haste in which it was composed, Michael is natural and uncomplicated. The chromatic harmonies that appear in the final phrase feel modern, but not out of place. The experimentation that Howells undertook with the hymn tune Michael is less familiar to us than the tune itself. His altered harmonization and descant for the tune are richly complex. It is possible that Howells broke new ground here by writing a descant for the conclusion of the hymn where the words do not match those of the first stanza. The words do not match those of the final stanza. The descant words are those of the first. Descants are already rich experiences of simultaneous sonority for those participating in the hymn singing. While worshipers may appreciate hearing a descant sung by the choir while they themselves continue to sing the melody, there is only so much mental capacity to tend to additional notes, let alone words. In Howells' descant texting experiment, he creates a full circle moment by using the beginning of the hymn text, but perhaps a moment of which only those singing the descant can be aware. It may be that Howells himself wanted to be aware of the descant. Depending on precisely when the descant was written, this may be a piece of memorial writing for his son. Hugh Ottaway, writing about Howells' large Hymnus Paradisi, explains that, quote, "For Howells, the visionary glory and the sense of loss, the ecstatic and the elegiac are closely bound up together," end quote. Christopher Palmer points to Howells' organ work, Saraband for the Morning of Easter, his seldom heard motet for choir and organ, God is Gone Up, and his popular hymn for St. Cecilia, as works where his anguish is transmuted into ecstasy. This grandeur, Palmer writes, this ecstasy, this exultation is ever present. And I would add that one of the places it comes to the fore is Howells' sublime conclusion to the hymn tune, Michael. Howells gives clear directions to the organist with this descant at the top, with utmost sonority. Let's hear the final two stanzas of the hymn, directed by Howells' pupil, Stephen Cleabury, and enriched by brass and percussion with an added interlude. The words of Robert Bridges' first stanza suggest a complete faith in God through life's difficulties. All my hope on God is founded. He doth still my trust renew. Me through change and chance he guideth, only good and only true. Whether or not the descant was written or retexted after Michael's death, surely the bereft father must have found new meaning in these words in the years afterward. Howell's son Michael was buried in the parish church of Twigworth in Gloucestershire. This is where Howells and his wife Dorothy were married. Only 2 years later, Howells would see his good friend Ivor Gurney buried there too. Howells and Gurney grew up first as choristers in the Gloucester Cathedral and later as articled pupils of their choirmaster, Herbert Brewer. In the Twigworth churchyard, the graves of Michael Howells and Ivor Gurney are adjacent to one another. Gurney died in 1937, and from the same year as Gurney's death comes Howells' hymn tune, Twigworth. Here, Howells returns to a conventional four-part hymn tune for the hymn, God is Love, Let Heaven Adore Him, by Timothy Reese. 4 lines from the second stanza of the hymn may help explain Howells' choice of text in this tragic year. And when human hearts are breaking under sorrow's iron rod, that same sorrow, that same aching, wrings with pain the heart of God. Twigworth is a conventional 4-part hymn tune in every aspect but one, Howells' choice of a G-flat major key. The choice is a bold one. It seems to be a widespread convention in hymnal publication to generally limit keys to those with no more than 4 flats or sharps. Because hymn tunes are read by such a wide variety of musicians, from cathedral organists to singers in parish churches, the use of simpler, more common key signatures ensures a higher rate of success with a given tune. Some of you know what I'm after. Howells could have chosen easier keys, that is to say, keys with fewer than 6 flats or 6 sharps, that are just a half step away on either side. F major and G major both seem like good candidates. But in the composer's mind, neither was quite right for this hymn. So we end up in a sort of uncharted territory, G flat major with 6 flats. From the end of the 1930s, there is a period when Howells seems not to have written any hymn tunes, certainly none that were published. But a quarter of a century later, the hymn bug strikes again. The dam might have broken with Howells' 1961 choral work, A Hymn to St. Cecilia, a hymn for St. Cecilia. While written for choir and not congregation, this is a sublime and tuneful piece that has a connection to Vaughan Williams. The text is by Ursula Vaughan Williams, Ralph Vaughan Williams' wife. Incidentally, Howells was so connected to Ralph and Ursula Vaughan Williams that he named his daughter Ursula, and she was a well-known film and television actress in her days. By the way, keep it clean is the advice that my wife gave me for this lecture. In 1962, Howells wrote 3 tunes. One of these, Newnham, picks up where he left off with Twigworth. It too has 6 flats in the key, but this time they indicate E flat minor. E flat minor is an auspicious key for Howells. His Jubilate Deo, written for the morning prayer liturgy at King's College, Cambridge, begins and ends in this key. Yes, the words, "Oh, be joyful in the Lord, all ye lands," are set in the minor mode. And somehow, in Howells' hands, it works. If Howells was comfortable writing in E flat minor as a joyful key, his hymn tune Newnham shows that he is also comfortable writing with it as an apocalyptic one. But in whatever mood this E flat minor is, it remains an unusual key for hymn singing. In the hymnal Rejoice in the Lord, Eric Routley moves the tune up to a more palatable E minor while providing the original key signature in parentheses. The hymn that gave rise to Newnham is Lord Christ, When First Thou Camest to Earth by Walter Russell Bowie. Bowie was born in Richmond, Virginia, and like the son of this lecturer, was baptized in St. Paul's Episcopal Church there. He was an ordained Episcopal priest. He was ordained an Episcopal priest in 1909, and in 1911 returned to the church where he was baptized to serve as rector. In the 1920s, Bowie left Richmond to become rector of Grace Church in New York and became increasingly involved with the social gospel movement. It was during this time that he was asked to write an Advent hymn that was reminiscent of the Dies Irae, Day of Wrath, Day of Judgment, a traditional part of the Requiem Mass. Bowie delivered with a hymn text filled with imagery more common in Passiontide. Phrases in this hymn include, upon a cross they bound thee, mocked thy saving kingship, robe of sorrow, and doomed to death, along with multiple references to thorns, crucifixion, and dust. Howells may have seen an opening for a new tune here when he read Bowie's words and saw how they were underserved or perhaps even undermined by the tune they are frequently sung to. Indeed, having sung Lord Christ, When First Thou Camest to Earth to Howells' dark and brooding Newnham, I find returning to the sprightly hymn tune Mit Freuden Zart, found at hymn 598, jarring. Howells befriends the darkness in Bowie's words. Mit Freuden Zart seems to trivialize it. It is helpful, I think, to experience this firsthand. So let us sing together the first stanza of Newnham, example 2 in your handout. If the hymnal 1982 missed an opportunity with Newnham, something it does mostly get right is the inclusion of Howells' Sancta Civitas for Bowie's hymn, O Holy City, Scene of John. This hymn tune was written for the 1964 collection Hymns for Church and School, more broadly disseminated in a supplement to Hymns Ancient and Modern called 100 Hymns for Today, was first published in North America in 1971 and the United States in 1974. The tune name Sancta Civitas is Latin for Holy City, but it may also be a reference to a 1925 oratorio by Vaughan Williams. Howells again turns to Walter Russell Bowie for this text. This hymn is a true social gospel text that dates from the 1920s and coincides with Bowie's move to New York City. The phrase street and shop and tenement seem to reflect not genteel Richmond, but urban New York. Howells' tune is elegantly constructed. Each of the 3 phrases begins with a descending fifth. After this falling motion, the tune moves mostly by step. In the first two phrases, the first 6 notes are identical, and the third phrase too starts with these same 6 notes, but transposed a fourth higher. And if the 4 descending eighth notes in the first and last phrases seem familiar, they happen to be the exact same pitches as the 4 eighth notes in Michael. You can see the 4 eighth notes there at the second system. It's the very same pitches that he uses when he has 4 eighth notes in Michael. Howells' organ accompaniment gives Sancta Civitas some harmonic ambiguity and some surprises. The tune is more or less in D minor, but we don't get our first D minor chord until the second full measure. For added spice, Howells includes a cross relation in the second phrase. This was a harmonic convention prevalent in the Tudor music that Howells loved and often emulated. And the final phrase of the hymn ends in the relative key of F major. As he did with Michael, Howells includes a descant. The slightly altered organ part revoices some of the chords to make them deeper and richer. As with Stanford's Engelberg, Howells is unafraid of leaving the melody to the singers and does not always have it doubled in the organ part. The most interesting feature of this hymn, though, is the first 2 notes in the organ. This 2-note introduction serves as the initial cue for the singing, but it also forms the bridge between stanzas that end in one key and begin in another. Howells gives a literal repeat sign here, implying that he wants a merry-go-round approach to singing this hymn. The concepts of merry-go-round, organ thump, and the harmonic shift combine to create a kind of 2-note updraft. This simple motive lifts us up out of F major so that we can fall down once again into D minor. Da-dum, ba-dum. As we listen to a recording of this hymn from the choir of St. Clement's Episcopal Church in Philadelphia, note the effect that this 2-note interlude has over the whole course of the hymn. I mentioned that the hymnal 1982 gets this hymn mostly right. Ray Glover, the general editor of the hymnal, explains what is not included. Quote, "To facilitate the use of this tune for congregational use, the Hymn Music Committee of the Standing Commission on Church Music altered the beginning of the setting by removing a two-note introduction and using the melody line as the upper voice in the first measure of the accompaniment." So in the Episcopal Church, we have been denied Howells' propulsive two-note updraft, one of the very things that makes this hymn tune unique. Glover also took issue with another seemingly minor change the committee made at the end of the hymn. Quote, "Another slight alteration was made at the end of the tune, where the penultimate measure was barred from a 5 to 4 beat measure. This may regularize the measures, but it denies the composer's sensitive setting of the text by placing the first unaccented syllable for the word again on a strong downbeat." Both of these changes are connected. The committee seems to have agreed that Howells wrote a good tune, yet they did not trust him fully. In the process, they excluded some of the most interesting features of this tune. As the hymn progresses, the two-note updraft becomes more effective, lending this short hymn greater urgency and conviction. The convention in organ accompaniment is generally to add sound to successive stanzas. In just two notes, Howells doesn't only bridge the gap. In partnership with Bowie's words, he invites, he beckons, he challenges, he dares. The third and final hymn tune Howells wrote during this period is Salisbury. This tune name also has biographical significance for Howells. He spent a few months as assistant organist at Salisbury Cathedral in 1917. In recent times, Salisbury, the hymn tune, has been taken up by choirs who sing it in a Malcolm Archer arrangement from the Oxford University Press collection, Epiphany to All Saints. Howells' original tune is in a flat key, but this time a mere 5 flats for the unusual mode of E-flat Dorian. One bit of true experimentation here is the 2-beat introduction. This is at once more elaborate and more subtle than the 2-beat updraft of Sancta Civitas. It serves as a quiet establishment of the first pitch for the singers, and it is set apart from the rest of the hymn by repeat signs. This signals that it is only meant as an introduction. It is not meant to be used as an interlude. Howells was likely used to organists playing the first phrase of a hymn or so to establish the tune in the minds of those about to sing. By providing this short introduction, Howells seems to be saying, that's not necessary. Try this more artistic approach instead. And here too, Vaughan Williams' influence is felt. Whether he is conscious of it or not, Howells has written something very similar to the parallel chords that begin Vaughan Williams' The Lark Ascending for solo violin and orchestra. The opening of The Lark Ascending sounds something like this. And Howells' hymn introduction has that same parallel motion. I'll slow it down. In practice, it goes by a little bit quicker. But still, I think there's a bit of Vaughan Williamsian inspiration there. In Howells' hands, these chords put us in mind not of a lark ascending, but of a dove descending, for Timothy Reese's magnificent hymn in praise of the Holy Spirit. Two of Howells' final tunes were written for the 1968 New Catholic Hymnal. In Manus Tuas was reprinted in the Lutheran Book of Worship in 1978, but with a different text. In its original form, to the words, "This world, my God, is held within your hand," In Manus Tuas includes a slight metrical change at the end, but some significant challenges with the way Howells aligns the words to the tune between stanzas. Even to a sympathetic and trained eye, the hymn text underlay for stanzas 1 and 3 appears a little ungainly in its original form. Stanza 2 is set separately and in parts. One also wonders if Howells meant for this hymn to be an E flat minor instead of the printed E minor, especially given the high E natural at the end of the tune in the printed version. Giving some weight to the speculation about key is found at the end of Howells' other tune in the New Catholic Hymnal, Norfolk. The pulse of Norfolk is generally 3 half notes per bar. But in the middle of the tune, Howells sensitively sets the quickening pulse of the text by rebarring measures into 3 quarter note beats. Seeing as how today is Earth Day, and we are likely the only group of people in the world to sing this tune, I think we should sing Norfolk, which is example 3 in your handout. Let's just sing the first stanza. I hope that more church musicians will become familiar with Howells' lesser-known tunes. Even the hymn tunes we know best would be well served by being sung the way Howells envisioned. Michael, when possible, with its raucous descant, and Sancta Civitas with its dynamic 2-note updraft. If the two were not such close friends, you could say that Howells would have been working in Vaughan Williams' shadow. As it was, he picked up the tradition of English hymnody with Vaughan Williams' blessing and tried some new things along the way. Some ideas were successful, others less so. We conclude with Howells at Gloucester Cathedral, the same place our story began. In his hymns, as in his other music for the church, Howells broke some rules and invented others in the pursuit of singing a truly new song. Howells' hymn tunes, standing alongside other signposts in his biography, point to rivers of grief bridged with the poetry, liturgy, and faith of the Anglican Church. That ecstasy and exaltation are possible amidst change and chance. That one can pursue visions of glory, even in times of deepest darkness. This is the legacy of Herbert Howells. Thank you.
David, thank you so much. I'm sure there might be some questions from the room, and we do definitely have time if there are any questions that you'd like to ask.
Please.
In Michael, before so we heard an orchestral interlude before the last. Is that original to Howells, or was that interpolated by?
It is not, but it happens to be wonderful. But I don't believe that arrangement, that linking those two stanzas, was Howells' composition. It's on the King's College recording that way, and I needed a good recording of the descant, and it didn't hurt that Stephen Kleber studied with Howells directly. So,
It's still nice.
yeah, thank you.
This is a slightly different question. That what you call the two-note octave, is he sort of making a shepherd tone in the hymn?
Yes. For those of you who don't know shepherd tones, this is an acoustical phenomenon where the highest partials of a rising line, sometimes you hear it as like a perpetual glissando, sometimes you hear it as notes. It's like an optical illusion in music or in audio. The highest partials sort of fade out and then kind of fade back in as lower partials. So it feels like almost like a barbershop pole that never stops. Yeah, and there is an element to that, I think, between the modality of the hymn. Howells does this in a number of these tunes where he kind of paints himself into a corner and ends up in a different key. And with hymn singing, these things ideally would connect. And so he found this kind of very simple connection in Sancta Civitas that I think helps that work well. Thank you.
I apologize if you covered this earlier, but could you talk a little bit about 2 or 3 of the more local influences that would have created such a distinct voice in Howells as compared to someone like Vaughan Williams?
Well, I mean, the Vaughan Williams relationship was very close. So we could even speculate that when Howells started writing these tunes, he might have shown them or sent them to Vaughan Williams. The English music community was close knit, and I think there may be plenty of influences that we just don't know about. The kinds of people that Howells was interacting with. I should have a better answer to that. Some of the people, his faculty colleagues at the Royal College of Music, for instance, for the tunes that he wrote in the 60s, may have had some influence on him. But yeah, surely it was a good melting pot of Anglican choral ideas that included hymnody. Yeah. Please.
I understand that Howells was very influenced by the Tudor era, but I was wondering exactly if it's known which pieces was particularly inspired by that era.
I think all of it. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think that was so shocking to Howells at the 1910 Three Choirs Festival was encountering this Tallis hymn tune that wasn't very well known at that time. Vaughan Williams kind of repopularized that, if you will. The other thing, Stanford, early in Howells' time as a student at the Royal College of Music, Stanford recommended him immediately to sort of write and have his pieces sung at Westminster Cathedral. Richard Runciman Terry at Westminster was doing a lot of work, pioneering work in those days, the 19-teens, of reclaiming music from the Tudor era. And so we know that Howells was involved there and also wrote his own music that imitated that same style. The Nunc Dimittis that we have that was written for Westminster Cathedral. Salve Regina is another piece that was written for Westminster. Some of these Latin motets that are early in Howells' output. Sadly, at least one of them has been lost. So we know that Howells wrote more for them, but I think that was hearing Vaughan Williams in 1910 and then being in the presence of Richard Runciman Terry in the 19-teens really kind of helps him whet his appetite as far as the broad range of Tudor era music that was out there and sort of waiting to be rediscovered. Yes.
David, you listed a group of unpublished tunes by Howells, and I'm wondering if you would give a count. Is it because they're terrible, or are there some in that list that in a perfect world you could be reborn? Or
the truth is, I don't know. Some of them may be accessible, and I just haven't found them yet. There is one mistake on there, however. Love Divine, All Loves Excelling is published. It's published by Oxford in a collection that I have and I forgot about I think it's called 5 Hymns, and it's in there with tunes by Francis Jackson. And I listened to it again last night, and it's fine. maybe I owe it a deep. Maybe, yeah. I mean, sort of along the ways that Twigworth that we looked at early on could be seen as sort of cast in the mold of Hubert Parry, the kind of hymn tune that Hubert Parry might have written at that time. That's the way that Love Divine strikes me. So there may be more interesting about it that I just don't know, and I need to study it more to find out. But other than those, I know next to nothing about the rest of the hymns on that list. I just know that they're out there. So. Please.
To me, at least, a lot of it's like harmonic and rhythmic style. It's such a departure from other sort of similar English composers at the time. Sort of its own sort of idiom. Like we were talking about what influences he might have had. That's from Wyatt's question. I'm wondering if there was anything that he was taking sort of not thinking his harmony sections, but innovations. Are there any influences that aren't necessarily that would influence him, that would have influenced him? So what makes him where does that?
That's a really good question, because what we would say about Howells is that his style is distinctive, and you can sort of hear a piece in his output and recognize it as him. So I think he infuriated his teacher Stanford a little bit while he was sort of developing this style, but I think it was very much his own. Some people kind of find an element of jazz in Howells' music. And I don't know to what degree Howells went to jazz clubs or concerts or, had any kind of interaction with that music. But however it was that it developed, yeah. So I don't know the specific. For instance, with Vaughan Williams, we're easily able to point to Ravel as kind of a big influence on shaping his sound. I don't think we have a name in Howells' development that had that kind of influence on his harmonies. I think that it was sort of self-discovered.
Yeah, I mean, everyone says jazz. That was very American thing.
Right. Yeah. These clever things that he does with the scale. In a sense, you can parody them because you can kind of identify what they are, and then you can write music that sounds like Howells. And if